this was an interesting chapter because I underlined every single paragraph, yet I can't think of many people who live the wrong way. I don't know many people who disobey the information or the edicts. I don't know many people who disobey what God has said here. Most people are family planning. The reasons might be different. They might be about, well, then we'll have more money for ourselves. Then we want to have more money. We want to have more time for each child. So the motives are different. And also the missionary part, which are saying more people could be missionaries, but instead they have to give their attention to families. I will, again, boldly say, I don't yet know personally any missionaries who are living the full gospel, who are living up to all the light they have, and I know they have the light which they are disobeying. So whether they are out there or not, it's immaterial to God, because they are doing him a disservice if they're out there, because they're not presenting the full gospel. They're not presenting the real Christ. And so it's, yeah, you can stay, you can go, you can have children or not. We've all become Laodicea, missionaries included. That's what really I'm saying. Whether we're members or missionaries, we're all like Laodicea. There are very few of us who are true Elijahs, true John the Baptists, who are willing to stand up alone and dress differently in our leather girdles and say, you brood of vipers, you leaders of the church, for example. Yeah, I don't know them. I don't know anyone personally who is willing, because those people were missionaries. They were missionaries, but they were also repairers of the breach within Israel. And I don't know those people. I don't know anyone like that. So this is actually not relevant to the people I know. But at the same time, I loved everything that was written. And it's not like it's information I can now put to use, because I can't have children. But I still found it all edifying. So let's go ahead and begin. Chapter 24. Oh yes, and the other thing, I was saying that people don't have many children anymore because mostly it's too expensive. It's not about I want to give good quality time to each child. Not necessarily. It's just really too expensive generally. But on the other hand, we have then the thoughtless people who just go around having children all the time. Mostly unmarried people in the world. They are the ones who this information would be most necessary for. The ones who have the children they can't take care of. It's a message I've wished for years could reach us here in Africa, because we are poor. We have been ravaged by war. We have been ravaged by greedy people who've enriched themselves with our land and our mineral resources. But we keep making children we cannot take care of. We need to stop. All right, let's begin chapter 24. There are parents who, without consideration as to whether or not they can do justice to a large family, fill their houses with these helpless little beings who are wholly dependent upon their parents for care and instruction. This is a grievous wrong, not only to the mother, but to her children and to society. As we learned in the first few chapters, society is composed of families, and is what families are made up of. If the family is just full of babies every single year, mom will never have time to be a guide, a teacher to this one, because there's still the baby over here. And it's not what God wants. That's not what God wants. Parents should always bear in mind the future good of their children. They should not be compelled to devote every hour to taxing labor in order to provide the necessaries of life. You see this thing in America. Oh, he's working 2 jobs so that he can take care of his family. It's not praiseworthy. That should not be happening. If one job can't support the family, he should not have had the family in the first place. It's a hard truth, but that is the truth. before increasing their family, they should take into consideration whether God would be glorified or dishonored by their bringing children into the world. Part of our problem is that we are deceived. God has said so. Our heart is desperately wicked and we are deceived. So we think we are good enough. We think we won't damage society in any way, and so we do bring children. We're not thinking, I am not yet right. I should therefore not bring children into the world. I mentioned this young lady, 20-year-old, who said, no way am I ready to be a mother because I'm not following God. So I don't want to bring in a child into the world who will be raised by me, because I'm going to raise that child not to follow God. But lack of knowledge, sometimes we really aren't studying, so we don't know that. But sometimes we study and we brush the knowledge to the back of our heads and hope we can live without that knowledge and still keep on proclaiming to be Christians. And then we bring up children who live with us, who are raised by us, with only a half picture of God, because we have chosen to live a half Christian life. And we're happy like that. I've never heard of anyone besides that girl saying, I'm not yet where God would want me to be, and so I will not have a child. Spiritually, I'm not yet there. I've heard people saying, I'm not yet there because I don't have a job or I'm not married, but yeah, it's rare. I never thought it. I never thought it. Then again, I didn't really study SOP until Spirit of Adventist Home until after marriage, so that might have had a something to do with it. But again, I thought I was on my way to righteousness when I did have children. I thought I was right. So deception again. I still had so far to go. I still had a long way to go. But I thought I had arrived. I thought I was a good enough parent. I thought, or I knew, that I would raise them in the fear of the Lord. But I don't know if I've learned truly who God is, and am I fearing Him truly? Do I know God? And this is the question we should all ask ourselves before we have children. Do we know God? And if we know Him, does He know us? Or would He come today and say, away from me? Yes, you preached for me. Yes, you were a missionary for me, but I don't know you because you didn't do what I wanted you to do. We really need to think hard and think twice, thrice, 4 times before we have a child, before we plan. Family planning is about planning your children, planning the size, planning what's called the gaps between the children. All right, so they should seek to glorify God by their union from the first and during every year of their married life. So, will God be glorified if I bring my children into the world? Or, because of their misbehavior, because I've taught them to disobey God, will they also then become a curse to society? Has the mother sufficient strength to care for her children? This one is a tricky one for people like me. Many of us get diagnosed with diseases later on in life. One of my late friends, in-laws, she had 4 children. Lovely. I've never met the children. Oh, I don't remember meeting the children. I met all of them. So I don't know whose child was whose. But yeah, no, I think they had 3. They had 3. And only later on did she keep saying, I've got these aches, I've got this problem. I was in hospital for a month. And she went to hospital. She was a teenager and, little children, primary age. And she died of lupus. So she didn't actually have strength. She was weak. She was sick. But she didn't know it meant she had a disease. And because they diagnosed it late, when she was dying on her deathbed, then they thought to test. It was too late. So sometimes we even lose parents because they actually were not strong. But sometimes you get diagnosed late when you don't realize that you will not be strong in the future. So if you know you are sick, that's what happens with adoption. They ask you if you are unwell, then you are meant to disclose every illness you have. And if you are sick, they ask, who will be your support system? Who is going to be your helper given you are sick? Who is going to help you care for those children given, you are not going to be able to render them full care? Those are the questions we need to ask ourselves. And can the father give such advantages as will rightly mold and educate the child? It's not about the money only. Dad needs to be a present dad. How little is the destiny of the child considered? I'm jumping a few. In broken health and with discouraged spirits, she finds herself surrounded by a little flock whom she cannot care for as she should. Lacking the instruction they should have, they grow up to dishonor God and to communicate to others the evil of their own natures. And thus an army is raised up whom Satan manages as he pleases. There's physical health and there's mental health. I was talking recently to a friend about how there are too many cases where mothers have children and then they go through clinical or postnatal depression, and then they have another child, and then again they go through postnatal depression, and then they have another child, and with each child it just gets worse and worse, and like a huge deep level of depression, medicated type depression. And then one day, after 4 children, they snap and they kill their 4 children, they kill their 5 children, and the excuse is postnatal depression. So they are broken, they are discouraged, but they kept having the children, they kept making the children. They were not thinking. Passion took over, and now the children are dead. I guess then there won't be a curse to society, but there are many of us who don't kill our children, but who are not parenting them. I know a young mother, okay, maybe 3 years younger than me, who is not parenting because she is clinically depressed. The teenager is the one who's running the home, and she's not running it well because she's a teenager. And there are 2 babies in the house, so she has to take care of the 2 babies. If you're prone to depression, really think twice, or otherwise live with someone who will be the mother those children need. It's not fair to them to raise them, or have them rather, and then you don't raise them right. If you're not training them, if you're not giving them attention, where are they getting the nurturing from? Where are they learning from? Who are they learning from? And should they be? God would have parents act as rational beings and live in such a manner that each child may be properly educated, that the mother may have strength and time to employ her mental powers in disciplining her little ones for the society of the angels. She should have courage to act nobly her part, and to do her work in the fear and love of God, that her children may prove a blessing to the family and to society. All right, again, the aim of children is the same as the aim of marriage, to be a blessing. Will this union honor God? Will it lead upwards? Will my having children honor God? Will it lead upwards? Let us be rational, not emotional. And again, of course, there are the outliers, or the things you cannot know in advance. People were so harsh on this woman who had 2 autistic children, or 1 autistic child, and then they're like, so why did she then fall pregnant when she knows that autism can be heritable or hereditary or genetic, and then now she's got 2 children who are severely autistic. But the thing is, the older child had not yet shown his autism or autistic traits when she fell pregnant. And she had already given birth when child number 1 was now clearly struggling. And then only to find out child number 2 is also clearly struggling. And then you still, as a mother of children with special needs, don't have the energy, the time needed to be the kind of mother the children need. And the children can't be educated depending on how severe their challenges are. It could be intellectual impairment, whatever it is. At 1 year old, you won't necessarily know that the child is going to have certain impairments. You won't know that the child is missing has got a certain deletion on one part of its chromosome, and that from now on it will have, he or she will have kidney problems, and this problem, and the brain is not actually formed inside the. We don't know that. Or I don't. People don't know that, so they just go ahead and have children, and then only discover way too late that yes, they planned, but they didn't know. They didn't know in advance that the child would remain basically as a baby. So they would constantly be almost like the mother who has a baby in their arms year after year, because each child is not maturing as they should. It's hard. You can't guarantee that everything will be perfect just because you follow the blueprint. Satan has many ways to bring strife. The husband and father should consider all these things, lest the wife and mother of his children be overtaxed and thus overwhelmed with despondency. He should see to it that the mother of his children is not placed in a position where she cannot possibly do justice to her numerous little ones, so that they have to come up without proper training. And that's one of my little pet peeves. Mothers. It's so clear, people. Mothers are the main teachers. Mothers are clearly the main educators, or should be, if you follow God's blueprint. God expects mothers to be the ones at the forefront of raising and educating and training the children. And that's something else we need to plan before we have children. Are we able to have the mother do this job in the first place? Or are we going to outsource the parenting, training, raising, and educating of our children to someone else? Not because we have to, but because we feel like it. Not because we're not qualified to, like with special needs, but because that's how we want to do it. That's another thing to actually plan and ask yourself, am I actually going to be the one to do these things in the first place? Before you even think about, am I going to be able to do it properly, thoroughly for each child? A child in the mother's arms from year to year is great injustice to her. It lessens and often destroys social enjoyment and increases domestic wretchedness. Babies don't sleep. Babies are needy. Babies don't wake up at 1 month old and crawl, sleep, feed themselves. You need to be constantly awake. And if you're awake for years, because every single year you're having a baby, it's hard. Believe me, it is hard. When I had my first son, it was after lots of planning, prayer, and hard work. Our other baby was a total surprise because we hadn't planned to have her. And in fact, they told me I was infertile. So she was a totally unplanned baby. When our firstborn was only 3 months old, we conceived her. And the two of them, people were like, oh, it's so cool. It's not cool. It's so nice. It's like having twins. I want to also have children with this gap. It's not the best way. Believe me, it's not. To have both children needing you to carry them around, it was like twins, and twins are hard. Triplets are even harder. That's all we used to say, that, well, at least they're not triplets. A baby in your arms year after year, it will lead you to be depressed and tired and unhappy. Babies are a very effective form of birth control, usually. That will take away part of your married life's enjoyment. You can't go around carting a baby around to every place, and your baby will start crying at the wrong time, and then you have to go out and you miss the conversation. It just does truly lessen social enjoyment. So you need to be ready for that, and don't keep putting yourself in that same loop if you can avoid it. Again, as I said, you don't know in advance whether the child you have or adopt will be okay, neurologically, developmentally, but you must plan for the best. Plan to do the best, and then God will make sure that somehow He gives you the strength if His plan for you, or if He allows you to have multiple children who are like little babies. God will somehow help you. He gives grace to everyone. Truly, if many of us knew what we know now, if many of us knew what would happen in the future, many of us would have not had children, because life happens and then you can't be the mother that you need to be, and then you surrender your children into the care of other people who are not good enough, or divorce happens and then you have to play single mom role. Single alone is much easier than single mom. Divorce happens and your child is saying, I want to go to daddy, but daddy disappeared, or daddy doesn't want to be visited, or visitation rules are only once every second week. And every time you drive past the same route, this is one of my friends, taking the child to school, every time the child cries, I don't understand why daddy can't live with us anymore. Why aren't you letting daddy live with us? There is a lot that happens that just ruins the future of our children. Even if we've planned properly, these things happen. So I understand, or I know that many of us are in situations that are not the ideal at all. And many of us are in the situations because of Satan, not because of choices we made. And sometimes we are in situations where we did make the wrong choice. There's a young lady who, she seemed to love the spirit of prophecy a lot, and she seemed to really be interested in it. She would always send me quotes that she really enjoyed or that stood out to her. But I could tell she wasn't fully there yet, because dress reform is in the spirit of prophecy, and she wasn't yet reformed in her dress. And then she told me, oh, there's this guy, but I don't really like him. He's pressuring me to sleep with him. And I said, don't you dare. And then she said, and he's got a temper, so I don't like him. So we agreed she will dump him. But just like my one child's biological mother, the next thing I know, Sister Tandy, you're going to be so angry with me. I'm pregnant with the man who we had agreed she would dump. And then you have children you didn't plan, and you're not in a two-parent home, and things are hard. Thankfully, she's got very, very good parents, so she could go and study, get a job while her parents raise the child. But it's not that easy, and it happens to all families. There is no bulletproof family where the child will not always guaranteed to stay pure. The best families, the most holy and upright families, will have a daughter who will just shock them and come back pregnant after everything they've taught. And these people become the sport of their family members, relatives, who had always said, oh, please, you think you're better than us because you don't drink like us or you don't sleep around like us. Now look is what they say. Sometimes it's not that we are messing up our children's future. Sometimes our children mess up our and their future, or their and our future, however you want to phrase it. So yes, there are exceptions to every rule. We need to do our best. Let's continue. We just need to do our best. Give it the best chance possible. And also do it right so that we never have any child's blood on our hands, any member of society's blood on our hands, because we will have been guiltless. And if they come right, either if they continue right or if they come back to God or come to God, it will be wonderful to enter heaven with the right family that you planned correctly. The question to be settled by you is, am I raising a family of children to strengthen the influence and swell the ranks of the powers of darkness? Or am I bringing up children for Christ? And you will find that in most families, most of the relatives and family members are not like this, are not like-minded. So you will be trying to raise your children for Christ, and they will be angry at you. They will throw stones at you. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. Why are you doing this? You will be in a lonely space most of the time. If you do not govern your children and mold their characters to meet the requirements of God, then the fewer children there are to suffer from your defective training, the better it will be for you, their parents, and the better it will be for society. I'm shocked sometimes where a mother will say, I believe in this, or I don't believe in this, or we shouldn't have this. And the next thing they are doing, the very this they said they shouldn't have. And you think, okay, so then what are your children learning? What are your children seeing? You're swelling Satan's ranks. And it's worse because you knew and you taught. But now, unless children can be trained and disciplined from their babyhood by a wise and judicious mother who is conscientious and intelligent, and who rules her household in the fear of the Lord, molding and shaping their characters to meet the standard of righteousness, it is a sin to increase your family. God has given you reason, and He requires you to use it. He requires you to use it. It is a sin. I shudder. I don't know how to. I don't know. I hate hearing that people who I know are not following God, who I've known for ages are not following God, are having a child. Because this is in my head always. A child for what? A child brought up by a mother who's not conscientious, a mother who doesn't honor God. Why? Why are you doing that? It hurts. Yes, there are many families where people seem to begin together, both growing in grace, and then you actually realize that the one had actually been pulling the other all along. And the other one has decided, nope, I don't want to be led to the water anymore. I will stand right here and you will keep walking forward while I stay here with the others on the Broadway, and in the ways diverge. There are those families too. And you can't fault them. They thought they were both judicious. They thought they were both wise, but they're not. Again, as I said, there are exceptions where you planned your family correctly, but then later on things go terribly wrong. And I feel sorry for those families too. Families where dad has to be mom and dad. Families where mom is mom and dad. Families where grandmother has to step in because mom and dad are both useless, are both not wise and judicious. Auntie cries because they're helpless. They can't save the children. They even contact social workers. I'm one of those aunts. And the social workers' hands are tied. It's hard. It's not only that they lack conscientiousness, that they're holy, but they're also neglectful. Too many children are being born that should not be born. Too many children. So, are you and your spouse living up to all God has told you? Is your spouse a believer? If the answer is no, it is a sin for you to have another child when you know that your spouse does not love God and the things of God. Fathers and mothers, when you know that you are deficient in a knowledge of how to train your children for the master, why do you not learn your lessons? Why do you continue to bring children into the world to swell the numbers in Satan's ranks? Is God pleased with this showing? When you see that a large family will severely tax your resources, when you see that it is giving the mother her hands full of children, and that she has not the time intervening between their births to do the work every mother needs to do, why do you not consider the sure result? Why don't you? She's asking, I also want to know, why don't you? Again, I was having a discussion with a friend this week whose heart broke because someone whose resources are already severely taxed is going to have a baby. I don't under, I know, I've also had people who claim, I don't know if they're liars, pathological liars, who claim, I did not want this baby. I'm struggling financially. And then the next thing you know, there's another one. And you say, what happened to family planning? If you don't want the child, if you don't want to make a child, there are ways to prevent it from happening. You're a grown Christian woman. You know when is your fertile period. You know how to prevent a pregnancy. So when people are poor and they knowingly, willfully have another baby, it is a mess. God hates it. And some of us are also very worried and we hate it too. Not because we begrudge you your children, but because we know what that means for the child who's going to come. That they're being born into poverty, into strife, into struggle. It's the same feeling we feel when you or your spouse are not right and you have a child. It's the same heartache, it's the same sorrow, and we're just human. How does God feel when you are not meant to have a child and yet you do so? Marriage is not a license to have a child. There are many other requirements that need to be met first. And it's also not a requirement, it's not a license to have more children. There are requirements that need to be met first. Resources, time, strength. Do you have those? Parents should calmly consider what provision can be made for their children. They have no right to bring children into the world to be a burden to others. There's a relative of mine who fell pregnant, and a friend of mine said, oh my word, that's going to be your baby, because this person is useless. Like they were useless. And thankfully it didn't become my baby because I don't live with them, but it did become the baby of the people the relative was living with, in every sense of the word. Don't have children if you cannot afford them. Again, there are exceptions. If you have a special needs child, that obviously will bring more financial strain upon you than if the child was not. If your diaper days will end when the child is 3, it's different if your child will forever need diapers till the day they die. Wheelchairs are expensive. You won't know until you give birth if your child has some problem, or if they will have cerebral palsy, something will go wrong. And then they'll have to need a wheelchair. They need therapies. Some things you cannot plan for. And there again, God will provide. But if you already are struggling to have room enough in the house for each child you already have now, why in the world would you have more? Those who are not qualified to take care of themselves should not have children. But unfortunately, most adoptable children are because the person was not qualified, the mother was not qualified to have children. And so they're thrown into the arms of society. And sometimes the arms of society are bad. There was a male gay couple, a gay male couple that adopted 2 boys, already struggling because the mother was on heroin, and then they were taken into foster care. And from foster care, they went into the family of these daddies, and the daddies had been systematically abusing them, sodomizing them. Don't have children you cannot raise. There are many, these are like people who are not Adventist yet, many who can but barely live when they are single, choose to marry and raise a family when they know they have nothing with which to support them. This day and age, they just live together, but yes, they marry and they can't afford even to take care of themselves. And worse than this, they have no family government. Their whole course in their family is marked with their loose, slack habits. Getting up late to do chores, doing not even doing the chores properly, can't control their tempers. They have but little control over themselves and are passionate, impatient, and fretful. Don't get married. Don't have children if you can't control your anger, your temper. Don't have children if you're a nag, if you're a bore, if you're impatient and fretful. When such embrace the message, so these now become Adventists, they feel that they are entitled to assistance from their more wealthy brethren, and if their expectations are not met, they complain of the church and accuse them of not living out their faith. How dare you not give me your money for the choices I made? You are not Christian. That is so typical of everyone, family included. We don't owe you. We have government. We plan our families based on what we can afford. And our money is for the worthy poor, the poor who truly could not prevent their poverty. Who must be the sufferers in this case? Must the cause of God be sapped and the treasury in different places exhausted to take care of these large families of poor? No! The parents must be the sufferers. They will not, as a general thing, suffer any greater lack after they embrace the Sabbath than they did before. God doesn't owe you money just because now you've joined his church. Our money, this is something my family would never understand. My relatives, actually all relatives. Our money belongs to God and to us. When we have done what we can for our family, as in our nuclear family, then we are meant to give to the cause of God, be it to his missionaries, be it to his publishing, be it to his truly deserving poor. It's not to be given to people who will drink the money away. It's not to be given to people who will use it on trivial, frivolous expenses. That's not how God works. You're not entitled to someone else's money. And when you have chosen to have children, you need to find a way to make the money. Don't put it at the church's feet. The church members owe God their money. In sending missionaries to distant countries, those men should be selected who know how to economize, who have not large families, and who, realizing the shortness of time and the great work to be accomplished, will not fill their hands and houses with children, but will keep themselves as free as possible from everything that will divert their minds from their one great work. So, the church was sending missionaries out. We were not just sending anyone who felt they were qualified to be missionary. We, the church, had to believe that you were being led by God. They sent out missionaries based on their character, on their obedience to everything God had passed down to the church from the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. They didn't just go out willy-nilly. I'm a missionary, give me money. This is why, again, I say it's things I underlined, but they're not really happening the way they should have been. They should be happening now. So, those men should be selected who A, B, C, D fulfill certain requirements. I don't think there's any selection process anymore. And if there is a selection process, it's a matter of, from my experience, when we tried to be missionaries, the first requirement was be able to support yourself financially. With the General Conference missionaries, you had to raise $10,000 each, if I remember correctly. $10,000. I won't even go into that. Was that how it worked in the beginning when God was leading the church through his prophetess, messenger, Ellen White? Did the missionaries have to raise $10,000 before they could go out and do mission work? Was that the initial and first and most important requirement? Things have changed a lot. Anyone can decide I'm a missionary, whether they actually are suitable, whether God believes they should be serving him or not. They will call themselves missionaries. But, so, either way, whether they really are called to be missionaries or not, if they are relying on the people, they should be economists and they should not have children. Because if they truly are doing the work of the Lord, then there's nothing else that can fill your time. It's like being a mother. Just as in the same way she says mothers should only focus on the children, missionaries should only focus on the mission. Yeah. Large families. Many, the missionaries we spent time with actually had large families. The missionaries we were with, most of them had 4, 5 children, and sometimes 3. The minimum of the ones who were married was 2. That was the minimum. 2 was the minimum. Otherwise, people had large families, but they were fine because they had lots of support from the families. And I'm talking here, like she said, about people who have been sent to distant countries. Yeah. So it still stands. Whether sent by God or not, whether using God's requirements or not, please try to be wise and plan your family. Keep it as a family of 2 as far as possible. And also the support you then get from your churches, which is how most people have survived. The support they get from their home churches from Canada, America, then they can put more of that money not towards feeding their own family, but towards projects that will help the actual people they're there to minister to. If you have family, children, then most of the money has to go towards the children, clothing the children, finding a curriculum for them. It's really better for God's work if more money goes towards towards his work than towards feeding your own family. The wife, if devoted and left free to do so, can, by standing by the side of her husband, accomplish as much as he. God has blessed women with talents to be used to his glory in bringing many sons and daughters to God. But many who might be efficient laborers are kept at home to care for their little ones. So here they are, this missionary couple going out together to work for God. Without really thinking about it, they have children. So then mom can't be a fellow laborer in that distant country with her husband because she's laboring at home. What used to happen with the missionaries in Tanzania was that there were people, girls or young ladies who would come to knock on the doors wanting jobs, wanting things because they're poor. Then we could minister in that way. But it's not the same as if we could go out into the field talking to the people. Having little babies makes it much harder to be a good, efficient, very efficient missionary. We want missionaries who are missionaries in the fullest sense of the word. Who will put aside selfish considerations and let the cause of God come first, and who are working with an eye single to his glory. His glory will keep themselves as minutemen to go where he shall bid, and to work in any capacity to spread the knowledge of the truth. There's no hierarchy. Work in any capacity. Men who have wives that love and fear God and that can help them in the work are needed in the missionary field. Many who have families go out to labor, but they do not give themselves entirely to the work. Their minds are divided. This is why Paul said it's better to be single than to be married, because otherwise, as a woman, when you are married, you now have to think about your husband and the children. It's easier to serve God when you're single. Wife and children draw them from their labor and often keep them out of fields they might enter, were it not that they think they must be near their home. It is a big thing to be a full-time missionary out far away from everything. It truly is God's plan. It was God's plan for people to go 2 by 2, not 1.5, 1.5. It was 2 by 2, both working together. The man as the main missionary working, but the woman as the one by his side doing her part as well. It works. It definitely can work, and it is obviously, clearly, logically the best. But we don't all live in an ideal world, and so there's nothing wrong with the large families who are out there doing God's work. If they were, it wouldn't be wrong if the children were then living the right way, if the children were also being a good example, if the children weren't leading people to a false understanding of who God is and what his requirements are. It wouldn't be a problem to have a large family if the large family was fully representing God in the fullest sense of the word, representing. So I pray that if you are still able to plan your family, plan it wisely. Look at yourself. Look at your spouse. Look at the work you are called to do. Are you called to distant lands to be a missionary, or are you a missionary in the office? Your husband, that is. I am going according to Adventist home. And then do what is best for wherever your role is, to be the right kind of family, to take care of yourself. You see, this is actually, in a way, me time in a godly sense. The mother needs to be able to breathe. And if you plan so that she can never breathe, you are committing a sin. If you plan in a way that you will constantly be needing to borrow money, you are sinning. If you plan in a way that you are all squashed into one bedroom, you are sinning. Plan with God. Plan not to have children with God. And if you are not having children, plan to use your time wisely to study. Fill yourself with his whole message so that you can take the truth, the real truth, to people who desperately need it. Have a blessed week.